You're listening to Head Voice, bringing you inside the minds of the best in contemporary a cappella. I'm Evan, and this week we are very lucky to be joined by one of the best, Mr. Ben Bram himself. Ben is a Grammy Award-winning arranger, music director, producer, engineer, and educator from LA. He's been with Pentatonix since their inception, has worked on the Pitch Perfect movies, The Sing-Off, Glee, just to name a few things, and has recently founded A Cappella Academy and the caroling company Snowfall. During the episode, we tried to do our best to talk about as much as we could with Ben, including his work with Pentatonix, arranging, and his work at A Cappella Academy. If this is your first time tuning in, we'd like to thank you so much for listening. We actually put out new episodes every week, so make sure to subscribe on iTunes or follow us on SoundCloud, and you can also follow us on all of our socials for updates when we put out a new episode. Links to everything I just mentioned will be found in the show notes, which is on SoundCloud if you click Show More, and on the podcast app if you click the album art. But without any further ado, I hope you enjoy this week's episode of Head Voice.
Cool. So, hi, Ben. Thank you for coming on and joining us today on Head Voice. We're very, very excited to have you on.
Yeah, excited to be here.
Yeah. So I just wanted to turn it over to you and just ask if you could kind of give us a little introduction about yourself, where you're from, how you got into music, and how you got to where you are today.
Sure. I am from LA. Grew up here, went to high school here. I started my musical journey as an instrumentalist. So I played piano first at age 5 and took on trumpet and French horn also, and played all through high school. In high school, I also got into arranging, composing. I arranged for brass quintet and my jazz band, and I wrote a musical with my friend and arranged it. And so just kind of threw myself into whatever I could. I was in the pit orchestra, jazz band, jazz combo. I had a ska band on the side. Mm-hmm. I was just hungry and just trying to do everything. And then when I got to college, I realized that I couldn't really continue to do that because everyone was really good. And I was no longer good at everything. I was good at everything from a high school perspective. Mm-hmm. But once you get into the real world of amazing collegiate musicians, I'm like, oh, okay, I should probably just focus on some things that I'm best at. Mm-hmm. So I started off actually playing French horn as a French horn emphasis, music industry major. And I kind of soon realized that I wasn't going to play French horn in my life, and I should do, that's after I got into SoCal vocals and kind of got more into the vocal world, I was working with pop musicians, songwriting with them, and band leading for them and stuff like that. So I was kind of more into the pop side of things. And then after that, I switched my emphasis to jazz vocals, which was a better fit for me. Yeah. And I feel like I kind of skipped over a lot of stuff, but that's kind of the basic overview.
Sweet. So I think kind of something that is evident in what you're talking about of your background and, your main roles of what you do today is that you've kind of embraced the role of being a producer, an arranger, somebody who's, behind the scenes, like making things work and happen. And so what's the appeal of that for you?
That's a great question. That's just always kind of what I felt naturally called to. Mm-hmm. I love to be surrounded by incredible performers and songwriters and people who are like artists in the true sense of like they have this thing inside them that they have to create, this thing that they want to communicate to the world. And I've never really felt that in that kind of way. My one driver and my one main passion is to help facilitate people like that to communicate what they're trying to do and do it in the best possible way. Right. So that's kind of what drives me, is finding really incredible talents and helping them, whether it be arranging or producing, or kind of working with groups to make them sound the best they can. That's kind of where I feel best, and I feel like I have the most to offer in that area.
Right. And just to kind of go off that a little bit too, I think a cappella is clearly a very niche thing, and vocal music in general is a niche thing. And I think a lot of people gravitate towards it because it's such a vulnerable and human entity in that way. So I'm just curious to see, like, why are you so drawn to it? Why do you want to help others specifically with vocal music?
Yeah, I kind of fell into it. I mean, in high school, I never had time to be in choir. I always wanted to sing. Never really had time. So when I got to college, I was like, yes, I want to be in an a cappella group. That's what I want to do. It's going to be great. I love to hang out with singers and actors and outgoing people because I'm not incredibly outgoing, and I love to kind of be surrounded by that energy.
Yeah.
So that's something that I kind of craved. And so when I got to college, I was like, yes, I want to do that. And then from there, it just was kind of a natural fit. I didn't really expect to have the rest of my career be in a cappella and be vocal music.
Yeah.
But it just kind of, the skills that I had and the interests that I had just kind of naturally lent themselves to me taking a musical leadership role in that kind of group. And then that opened opportunities for me to do it as a job.
Right. And I think that you, as much as anybody else in the a cappella community, have been involved with projects and groups that have been able to get a lot of legitimate opportunities in the mainstream music industry. So from your vantage point as somebody who's helped legitimize a cappella music, what are you hoping for in terms of enabling groups and projects to transcend that line?
Yeah, sure. I think there's a ton of opportunity for more groups to come through and do what Pentatonix has done. I think it's incredibly difficult, but I think the opportunity is there. And I think that with the right combination of talents and with the right material and with, the right work ethic, I would love to see a few more groups. I mean, I want to say many more groups, but I don't think that's realistic. But so I think a few more groups to do kind of what they've done in different styles and different group makeups and, who's in the group and what kind of a group it is. And I think there are a few different possibilities for that. And I would love to see more groups kind of do what they've done.
Yeah. And I think also it's very clear that Pentatonix has kind of led the way for other groups and inspired other groups to do just that. And you've been a part of something that kind of almost transcended how vocal music is viewed by the public, which is a huge thing. And I think I'm just curious to see, like, what was it like being a part of something that was able to break down that barrier, and like what were the biggest challenges that you were able to overcome?
Yeah, I mean, it was super cool. It was incredible. It was, I mean, to us, we were just kind of doing what we loved and working with each other, and just creating stuff.
Right.
And it, it was incredible that the response to it and the response that people still have to it, and people really took to them. But, it didn't come without a lot of kind of effort. And if they hadn't committed to this idea that they could be something, it wouldn't have happened. And, after the sing-off, they won, but they didn't have, it wasn't kind of handed to them. The record deal kind of fell through. They basically had to start over and just have their YouTube channel be the method of how they got to people.
Yeah.
And so that's really where the real work was done, and where they really said, okay, what are people going to like? How can we present this in the best way? What songs should we do to get the most hits? And like, they kind of played that game to kind of just get themselves out there and have these viral videos reaching millions of people.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what that initial phase was.
Right.
So kind of playing off that a little bit, from what I can tell, the music industry has kind of shifted to where, it's not you work hard and you play shows and a record label executive sees your show and then they book you and give you a record deal and that whole thing. It's more, Pentatonix had to find their own way by cultivating a community through the internet and using these like new media techniques to, innovate and have their following. And then eventually it seemed like labels were able to have interest and stuff.
Yeah, I think going back to the first thing you said just about record labels and stuff, like I think that was a huge point of kind of how the record deal happened, that they eventually got with RCA, in that, you know, they really built themselves and they built their brand first.
Right.
And they got out there and they kind of said, okay, here's what we do. It's working. We have millions of fans. Now we want your help, the record label, to help spread it to everyone and just kind of get it out there and give us more budget to do cooler stuff and all that. And so by doing that, they put themselves in a position of strength and not in a position where the record label is like, oh, like, you know, you're really talented, but like, what if you have this? And what if you add instruments? And what if you do this and this and this? So they were able to kind of say, look, this is working for us. Back off. You know, give us the space that we need and the resources that we need, and we will deliver. And that's what they've done, which is really cool. And something that I don't think a lot of other artists get to experience, because a cappella's niche and record labels don't quite know what to do with it. So they're just like, oh, it's working, so maybe just let them do their thing and, you know, let them keep the team that they've had. Because if it wasn't a cappella, then the record label would have replaced me a long time ago. You know, they would have said, okay, let's get like a veteran or like, you know, a top 40 guy to produce it and all that stuff. So because it's kind of its own thing, we got to really do it our way, which is really cool.
Yeah. Outside of Pentatonix, you're obviously multifaceted and have just so many different talents within a cappella music, whether it's arranging or producing or recording and whatnot. But I feel like arranging specifically is one of your very unique crafts or one of your incredible talents. And I'm just curious to see where does your inspiration come from for arrangements and music?
Yeah, I try. So, you know, a lot of people ask about favorite a cappella arrangers and kind of who I've listened to over the years. And, you know, I really try to listen outside of a cappella for inspiration. That's really where I get most of it. And, you know, I'm just listening to everything. I'm listening to effective pop music and other styles that I can bring into it. And so, yeah, I just really keep open ears. I listen to a lot of kind of gospel, soul, funk, R&B, and really like the best. I think that the thing that sets our kind of arrangement style apart a little bit is, you know, the focus on background vocals in a pop way.
Yeah.
I didn't say that very well, but basically point being treating the a cappella background parts as background vocalists.
Right. 100%.
You know, if you went to a Stevie Wonder show, what would the background singers be doing? If you went to a Lettucey show, what would the background singers be doing? And kind of incorporating those kinds of stylistic techniques into our a cappella music. And so that's kind of been my way to kind of make it a little bit more soulful and current. And obviously a lot of people are doing stuff like that too, but that's kind of just where my head's at.
Right.
Totally. So we have some questions from some of our listeners that we're going to go through right now. We have a question from Ivory Tickler, who asks, where or how do you find yourself empowered to do your best work?
So I have my a studio that I built in my garage, which is my safe space, my haven. So that is technically locationally where I do my best work, because I've kind of just, you know, everything here is just kind of as I need it. I have all my equipment set up the way that I like it. I have, you know, in a lot of bigger studios, the actual computer is at a 90-degree angle from where you're supposed to be looking at the singer. And in my studio, I have it right behind my computer screen. So I'm able to just sit in a very comfortable way, facing front and seeing the singer that I'm working with.
Very specific, you know, feng shui.
Exactly. It's like little things like that just make the whole experience flow better.
Yeah.
I don't let kind of arranger's block, writer's block get me hung up on anything. You know, after doing enough arrangements, you just kind of learn how to get something down and kind of push through that block in a way where you can still be productive and still be doing something, and so it doesn't even feel like a block. It just kind of continues and rolls along, and you come back to it later, and yeah.
I think just kind of going off this too, we got another question from the Instagram account. I love this name. It's called Misbehaving Mitchie. This Instagrammer asked, how do you know when something you've written or arranged is good enough? And along with that, they also asked, how do you know when to stop working on it and say it's done? Which I think is a really good question. Yeah,
that's a really great question. I mean, it's basically a feeling. If I arrange something and it's not done yet, I'll kind of know.
Yeah.
There's no real indicator of it. It's just a gut feeling of I can do this better. I can rework this section to make it flow better. I can make this more unique, and less like the original version if I'm just doing an arrangement. It's just intuition, really, and that comes from experience and just doing it enough times where you know what you're capable of, you know what the potential is of each song and each arrangement and each group that you're working with. And so you're able to identify that and say, okay, this can be better.
Yeah.
This is a follow-up to that from me and not from Misbehaving Mitchie. But like on the flip side of that, I think that's a great answer to how you know when something's done. But for me, I know when I'm arranging, the toughest part is just seeing a blank canvas and not knowing where to begin, but as soon as I'm in it, it's fine. For you, like what gets you through the door to just, get the train out of the station, so to speak?
Yeah, I mean, the easiest thing, the thing that I do that I love is I have someone else transcribe the melody and bass line for every song that I work on. So when it comes to me, it's already, there's something there. I don't have to painstakingly write out the melody. And if it's a pop tune, there's going to be a lot of syncopation. It's going to be a big pain in the ass and just kind of get through it. So having that there, obviously not everyone can pay someone to do that.
Yeah.
But really just getting that down and just going through that, getting the melody and bass line down makes everything so much easier. You can harmonize the melody. You can just start writing out chords. And everything, like once those two things are kind of out of the way, everything else flows a lot easier.
Right.
That's funny that you say that, because we did an arrangement for our old college group, and like we went on like Fiverr.com and like got somebody to like transcribe the melody and or the bass line or something, and it just like makes it so much easier. So to anybody who's arranging out there, I would highly recommend that if you have $5 or $10 laying around, to just get that.
Oh yeah, that's
helpful.
Awesome.
And like,
yeah,
it's just so tedious.
I mean, basically, it's tedious and it expends energy in a way that is not creative.
Yeah.
So if you can save that for something that is creative, it just makes it that much better.
Yeah. When you're making an arrangement, you obviously hear it in a certain way or have a certain picture that you're trying to paint with each section that you build. So how do you kind of create the arrangement, or like use text or use different features to make sure that it really fits the vision that you're trying to create and the style that you had imagined when you're making it?
Great question. Yeah, I mean, a lot of the times when I start an arrangement, I don't really know where it's going to end up.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a really intense blueprint for it. I'll go into it, if I have some kind of predetermined, like if the group says, I want this song in a Latin style, then it's going to be pretty clear like what I have to do.
Mm-hmm.
But if it's do this song and make it cool and make it the best it can be, I kind of start with a blank canvas and go from there. And I basically put down whatever comes to me first, whether it's, the bridge or the chorus or, I don't necessarily start from the beginning. I rarely start from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
I start where the inspiration hits.
Yeah.
And what if I do this here? And then I kind of work off of it like a puzzle. So you have the part that that you really like, and you were trying to make the rest of the song fit to it. So that means the transition into it has to be effective to make it hit in a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
That means the transition out of it into the next section has to be, has to work. And the next section has to work against the previous section. So contrast is a huge, huge tool that I'm always using and thinking about, how to make things contrast with each other in a good way,
mm-hmm.
in a way that sounds great, in a way that highlights the group. yeah, that's always something that I'm thinking about from one section to another, from one song to another, and just making sure that you're always keeping the audience listening and engaged.
Mm-hmm.
So in regards to what you're just talking about, I think that when you listen to a lot of a cappella, I think what often is missing is there will be really cool sections from part to part, but the transitions are, what's lacking, and it doesn't feel cohesive, and it doesn't feel like there's a thread going throughout the piece. So are there any concepts or things that you think about or tricks that you use to try to make sure that that the piece feels cohesive front to back?
Yeah, that's great. I mean, the biggest thing that I'm thinking about is kind of the emotional arc of the whole thing, and that's just, again, something that I just kind of formulate naturally and can kind of just sense where it's going. It's hard to kind of put it into words, but it's just something that I'm always aware of and I'm always cognizant of. But as far as like tools, I basically create this toolbox, and then I gather information as I do more and more arrangements, and I see arrangements that are really effective, and picking it apart. And why is that effective? Is it because the bridge just feels so good and it feels good compared to the other parts of the song? It's basically, you're just taking the audience on a journey, and you just have to kind of make sure that you're a good pilot and kind of flying this plane in the right way, and making, like, hitting the right marks and doing all that. I know it's really rambly and not very direct, but it's hard because it's not a very direct thing. It's like you really have to play around with it. Right. And there are really no rules to it. It's just what has worked in the past and how you can combine your skills to make something that works now.
Right.
So going off what you just said, you've obviously worked with a huge range of groups, and at this point, I think it would be fair to call you a prolific arranger. And so I think a challenge that many people face with a cappella music is that, it's the most basic one, is that there's no instrument, so you can't throw on a different, a new guitar pedal to make your group sound different or whatever. You only have the voices that you have and what the voice is humanly capable of doing. So how do you, when you're, doing arrangements for a wide variety of things, try to help a group to have their own sound? Because, there's tricks in arranging that can work, from Pentatonix to a huge collegiate group to, a big choir. Like, certain chords just sound nice, and there's some things that just work. But how do you, make sure, whether it's for Pentatonix or for like a collegiate group, that they are staying true and making something that's unique to their sound?
Yeah, that's a great question. First of all, I want to get to know the groups as well as I can. So a lot of the time that's just a YouTube video or two, and kind of descriptions of each member and their range and what they're good at, and just kind of feeling out stylistically what the group is going to be best at and what's going to suit them. So I arranged for Committed recently, and I've arranged for Home Free and Pentatonix, and they're all 5-person groups now.
Yeah.
But yet the style is incredibly different from group to group, and they all have their kind of signature things that they do. And so just listening, when you have groups like that who have albums, you can kind of listen to the back catalog, and I've also worked with all of them on the sing-off, so kind of knowing them intimately, it helps a ton. Just kind of having that bass line, no pun intended, BASE line, for kind of what is going to make them sound the best, what techniques to employ, all that. And then when it comes to other groups, college groups and semi-pro groups, and it's really just kind of, with whatever information you have, doing the best job you can to emulate kind of what's going to make them work.
Yeah. And just to kind of go off this too, Evan and I have this kind of running philosophy that we don't think voice parts truly exist. I think people's voices are super malleable and can really work to achieve different sounds. So I'm just curious if you, in knowing a group and knowing the vocalist that you're working with, do you ever just push limits, and do you ever put a certain voice on a certain point on a certain part just because you want that tone to come out more or things like that?
Yeah, I'll only do that with groups that I know very well and voices that I know very well. But that's really where you get the most magical stuff, is when you have an arranger or if the group is arranging it on their own and they're really so aware of all of their capabilities and all of their strengths and all of their weaknesses, and just kind of carefully dancing around all of them in a way that puts their best foot forward and makes them shine the best. So yeah, I mean, when I do arrangements for large college groups, they're going to be good, but it's not going to be the same because I don't have the level of intimacy with them and I don't know their voices well, and it's just kind of, here's an arrangement that will work for most groups and it'll sound great. But it's usually not going to get to that point of magic that you can get to with some smaller groups, with groups where you really know each of the voices really well.
Yeah.
Definitely. And we have one last listener question from Yang Chen. So you mentioned that you listen to a lot of music outside of a cappella for inspiration, but is there an arrangement or two that stand out in, like, you know, the past 5 years, let's say, that you kind of feel are outside of your work, you know, things that people should look to as an example for, like, what a good a cappella arrangement is? I
think the stuff that Pitch Slapped is doing recently is incredible, and I'm a huge fan. So like their whole last album, Complexion, is really awesome. I'm trying to think of the songs on it that I am obsessed with, but I forget which songs they are. But that whole album is awesome, and I love the style that they're getting into. It's kind of, they've really kind of formed their own style, which is really cool as a collegiate group to have. Because most collegiate groups kind of just do their thing and they're kind of, okay, more towards this style or more towards this way, but they've really kind of shaped their own sound, which is really cool.
Totally.
And we've actually had a couple of them on, but they definitely know their style, and it's interesting to hear how they work and how they create music together. It's very professional and very just inspirational to hear. So it's also really cool how it's not any one arranger that's kind of doing all the arrangements. They, you know, it's Jerry Jenkins, it's Tracy Robertson, but it's also Sterling Ruddy, who's one of the new guys, I think. Like, and when they do arrangements, you don't really know whose is whose because they're all borrowing off of each other, and it's now the Pitch Slap sound. It's not any one person's sound, which is really cool because it's not like one mastermind behind it all. It's like this group has really crafted it. Yeah, it's awesome. Definitely.
So a few of the Pitch Slap members that we have had on are actually A Cappella Academy alum, as I'm sure that you know. And so obviously we here are huge fans of everything that you've done with A Cappella Academy, but you are one of the original co-founders. So what inspired you to start this?
Yeah, so the original inspiration was Avi was on tour. I was actually on tour with him. I was doing sound for Pentatonix, and this was probably 2013. And he, you know, randomly tweeted, "Oh, I want to buy a cabin in the woods and have a camp there, have an a cappella camp." And Rob saw it and responded to it and was like, "Hey, I want to do that too. Let's do it." And then I was like sitting in the van with him and I was like, "Hey, I want to do it too." And I responded, and you know, we had all kind of thought about this on our own. When I was in SoCal Vocals, I would talk about it. I was like, we should have like a summer camp for high school kids where they kind of come work with the vocals and kind of have this whole a cappella experience with a top level group. And so, yeah, it's something that we had all kind of wanted to do. And just the three of us coming together made it so that we had the resources to be able to do it. And with Avi's connection with Pentatonix and with his, you know, fans, we were able to really get the word out in the way that we needed to get it to work. It just kind of happened, and we worked really hard and found everything we had to do and made it happen.
Yeah. It seems like musicianship is a huge priority for the camp and instilling certain musical values. And I'm just curious if there's any values that you particularly strive to instill in students or try to incorporate when you're at the camp or doing workshops and whatnot at the camp?
Yeah, we have a very strong kind of mission statement and kind of feeling about what we want to be teaching and what we want the kids to leave with. And this is kind of just based on our own experiences and on like, okay, what if we could create the perfect musician out there in the world, what kinds of things would they, why would they be doing music? What would they be doing it for? What kind of skills would they have? And so from the like emotional standpoint, we want people to be doing music for the right reasons, and we want people to be team players, and just really, changing the world through music and making people's lives better.
Yeah. That's
kind of our overarching theme, and that we don't want any egos. I mean, you can have a healthy ego, but we don't want any inflated egos. We want everyone to be kind of just there for the joy of it and to help other people. And yeah, so that's kind of our thought when we're, deciding who to accept and kind of what we're teaching and what we're kind of instilling in these kids. And then as far as musicianship goes, I mean, that's something that so many singers would benefit from and just didn't get the foundational skills. And so we're really trying to kind of hammer that home at a younger age and say, look, like if you know how to read music, if you can sight read, you will be much better prepared to do a larger number of gigs, to just kind of be a working professional musician out there in the world. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's awesome. I've been using some of my camp kids on some of my like pro gigs that I'm doing, and like I'm having them come record stuff for various demos, and like they're awesome. So it's really cool to see kind of what we've built come to fruition, and having these kids kind of get out there in the world, and they're in college groups now, and they're leading, and they're starting groups of their own. Yeah. It's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's really cool to see, whether it's, Vocalite or Legacy or it's Charlie. I'm just naming only the people that have been on the podcast because they're on my mind. Yeah. But all these kids are doing great stuff. And then at the same time, there's so many kids from Academy that are filtering out to Thornton at USC or Berkeley.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing that we do there for kids wanting to get into music or like unsure about getting into music is that we say, hey, look, like you can do this. This is a feasible goal. This is something that you shouldn't shy away from if it's what you're passionate about. So there have been kids who, have really had been before camp planning not to go into music, to go into some other fields that's a little more stable, who have come out of camp like totally energized and like ready to do music and inspired by everyone, and they end up going to music school, and they would not have otherwise. So I think that's really cool to see people just having the courage to follow their dreams. And it's great, and that's amazing. And then as far as like the larger music education world, I think just as the Academy family grows bigger every year, there's just going to be more and more of an influence and more people out there doing amazing things and starting groups and being professional musicians. And I'm really excited to see kind of what the future holds.
Yeah, so just to kind of go off this, we actually had another listener question from Nicole Garcia, and she was saying that becoming great in music doesn't necessarily happen overnight, and it can be a very challenging thing and intimidating, especially for high school students or people who want to get into music in college. So she was just curious if you had any advice for incoming college music students who are nervous about the road ahead.
Oh yeah, I mean, my main advice is just to do as much as you can. I spent my high school career just kind of delving into any kind of musical opportunity that I thought was cool. And it really got my feet wet in a lot of different things. And it made it so that I was never, I never said, oh, I couldn't do that. Or like, I always kind of felt like if I put my mind to something, I could do it. And I think that's really key, especially going into music. People have to be able to do so many different things. You know, when I was in college, I was like, oh, I can't be an engineer. Like, I don't have the skills. I don't know how to use Pro Tools. And I was able to have these kind of training experiences, you know, whether it be working on the SoCal Vocals album, watching Chris Harrison engineer it, and, you know, I was kind of music directing it, and just watching him use Pro Tools. And then the next time I had an opportunity, you know, I got an opportunity with the backbeats from season 2 of the Sing Off to create this album for Gap, where we were kind of recording these random cover songs. But it was an opportunity that I would never have been comfortable engineering if I hadn't had that experience with Chris in the studio, and if I hadn't taken Pro Tools class at USC. So just kind of spreading your wings and dipping your fingers into as much as you can, I think, is the best way to prepare for a future in music.
Yeah,
that's awesome advice. So we're nearing the end of the episode today, and there's 2 questions that we generally like to end on. The first being, what trends are you excited by in a cappella music at present, and is there anything that you're hoping to see, you know, in the coming years?
I think the main trend in a cappella is that everything is just getting better and better and better. It's really cool. The quality of everything is just exploding. There's so much good a cappella music out there, and I think it's amazing. It's like, just with YouTube and with everything, like, everyone's skills are just getting so much better. It's really cool. So I think with that comes, like, any enormous amount of possibilities for what lies ahead. Yeah, everything's just really good now. Not everything, most things.
And then the second part, what is on the agenda for you? What projects do you have coming up that you're looking forward to?
Yeah, I have a couple fun things that I'm working on. There's an app coming out called, well, the app is out. It's called Episode, but there's a story inside the app, which is a pitch perfect story, which is really cool, that I am doing all the music for.
Oh, very
cool. I'm arranging it. I'm recording amazing singers on it. And it's not the voices of the actors from the movies. It's just amazing, great singers that are coming in and being the voice of each of the characters. So that is a really cool project. The app is made by PocketGems, so it's PocketGems Episode. And I think that's coming out in a couple months, 2-3 months or something like that. I did a promo for the new Pitch Perfect movie, a little kind of Christmassy thing that might come out.
Snowfall, I assume, is doing.
Yeah, I have my caroling company. We just added a bunch of new members for this year. So it's called Snowfall. If anyone is in the LA area and needs a contemporary a cappella caroling group, find us online, snowfallla.com. And yeah, I'm excited for a great season with them. And I'm in LA Choral Lab, which is a cool choir in LA. So we have a Christmas concert for them as well. And yeah, I think that's about it.
Sweet. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Ben. It was a real pleasure talking to you.
Thanks for having me.
And we hope that you will join us next week for a new episode of Head Voice.
Without you.